welcome back everyone to our Last of Us watch party. The first season has concluded and the overall impression is pretty good. Really good in some parts. The ending especially. As a rating, I'd give it 7 out of 10. Very solid and I do recommend it, but not quite epic tier. It's still far from perfect, but the show is very consistent in that what it gets right is always on point. The basic plot and setting is post-apocalypse America. An incurable fungus that turns people into literal zombies has spread across the planet. A single bite or cut and you become one. The few survivors have gathered in old cities called quarantine zones and are led by a brutal authoritarian government. It's post-constitutional America. Corruption is rampant. The elites enrich themselves with whatever they can and dole out severe punishment to any pleb who steps out of line. Come to think of it, it's a lot like modern America, really. Oh, I kid. We don't have zombies. No zombies of any kind. We just have TikTok users. TikTok. Actually, I'd rather have the zombies. Can we trade? Who knew the post-apocalypse would prove to be optimistic? Anyway, it turns out there is one girl who got bit and didn't turn into a zombie. No one knows how. Could she be the cure to it all? A group of freedom fighters called the Fireflies want to investigate. Only problem is they need to get her halfway across the country to where their medical teams are. It makes you wonder though, or at least it makes me wonder. Are there no doctors or anything closer by? Is this government so corrupt you can't trust them to actively look for a cure when presented with a girl who is immune? It reminds me of Children of Men, which had the same logic problems and was so overrated it made me mad. Either way, we're here for an adventure, so just go with it, alright? Off they go on the journey with so much death along the way. Eventually they make it to the doctors, but we learn the cure comes at a grave cost. And Joel decides the cost isn't worth paying. I'll talk more about the ending and moral choices later. Let's start by focusing on where the show really succeeds. Without a doubt, the show goes perfectly right in what I'd call the broad strokes of world building, that is namely the visuals. The ruined cities are fantastic and believable. While the different cities visually feel similar, they are all connected in that they are essentially ruins to the past. In contrast, the countryside is very open and full of possibility, while the survivor village is bustling full of life. There is even a visual point of excess in the survivor village, which shows they are not worried about limited resources. The infected are also a fresh look at the classic zombie trope. While obviously it's all made up, there's something inherently believable with how they are portrayed along with the provided backstory on the origins of the fungus. The show demonstrates excellent writing craft. By craft, I mean it uses scenes like this one to create a lighthearted mood just before intense and dramatic moments. Also, as I explained in my last video, the show excels on what info to provide and what to hold back. The first 2 episodes began with flashbacks that established the premise for the virus. It is not in the source material. These small scenes are both suspenseful and set up later encounters with infected. We can immediately understand why they got that way and look as they do. The bigger, scarier ones make sense too. It helps with the organic feel of this post-apocalypse world. The performances also deserve discussion. There seems to be some disagreement with players of the game over Bella Ramsey. I didn't play the game, but I always felt Bella fits the role well. While perhaps hypothetically another actor could have taken it to another level, I don't think that's negative to this performance we got. By the last 3 episodes, we saw her really fall into the role, and the scenes come off well. I also tend to think Bella not having the stereotypical Hollywood starlet beauty you're so accustomed to actually serves the show. It feels more real. It's like, yes, this girl would emerge in a world like this as the one person with immunity to the disease. Still, Pedro Pascal really carried the show. Here's a man who's gone from a popular one-season character on Game of Thrones to a serious star. It's complicated playing a character with a tragic past who is mostly reserved. On the one hand, you're broken a little on the inside, but on the other, you aren't showing it. I think Pascal did really well and especially succeeded in the last episode. When he tells Ellie the truth about his scars, the best character moment of the series. Their chemistry also improved as the show went on. It was certainly a little cold in the beginning, which is obviously the point, and then the bond started to show. I tend to think they really hit their stride in the final episode. This is definitely a show that went out on top. Now that's not to say everything was perfect. I already addressed some of my gripes with the show in other videos, but just to reiterate here, this is a show that gets the big things right and totally flakes on the details. Frustratingly so. Like in episode 8, Ellie tries to escape the bar but is locked in. She's specifically told everything is locked and can't get out. Then at the end it just cuts to her walking out a door all willy-nilly. Like I thought that was impossible. It's not the biggest deal, but they could have had her throwing down keys that maybe she pulled off David's body. I guess if you want to get into the details, we can point out the dialogue is good but not great. The characterization and story are all there, but there's a real lack of great memorable lines. Certainly not the type you repeat to your friends or post memes on. Now to be clear, because I know so many people need that, functional dialogue is still better than maybe 90% of what's out there. It's just not going to take it to the next level. How many times have you been taking a piss or driving down the road and absently repeating lines from this show? Yeah, me neither. Now I do want to talk a bit about the end here, which apparently has generated a lot of debate since the video game was first released. Basically, was Joel justified in what he did? He kills a lot of people and sabotages the chance of a cure, all to save one person. Does that make sense? Is it justified?
Logic clearly dictates that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Certainly Spock, in that context, would say no. The argument for that is mostly one of straight numbers. Millions upon millions of lives can be saved from a cure. Maybe a cure can save the whole human race. Surely the sacrifice of one person is justified to literally save everyone else. Except obviously if you think about it somewhat rationally, you realize it's not so simple. It begins with something I view as a criticism of the show, though I understand why they did it. That is how fast everything happened when they reached the hospital. Look, when Joel woke up, it couldn't have been that long. Maybe a few hours? It's still light out, for goodness sakes. Like, how could these doctors have examined Ellie and determined the only course of action was to cut her open and kill her that fast? No, seriously, just this morning, I spent as much time in a doctor's waiting room as those doctors spent examining Ellie. Yet the show claims in that small amount of time, they determined the only way to proceed. It's so ridiculous and unbelievable you wonder if the intent is to show these doctors don't know what they're doing at all. That's what I would think. So if they have no idea what they're doing, then Joe is absolutely justified. In fact, he was morally obligated to save her. Then it also comes back to what I said earlier. Are there no other doctors anywhere who would want to investigate a girl who is immune? What about the survivor's village? The place seems to have everything. Do they not have any doctors? Now, in fairness to the show, and I suppose the game, is that this sudden revelation creates suspense and adds urgency. Joel is up against the clock here, but even with those considerations, you can't really take the doctors at their word. Any rational person will want to try all sorts of different tests and procedures before they cut open and kill the only immune person on the planet. And there's no guarantee any of it will work, obviously. Under those conditions, how could anything they're doing be justified? It's not. In a weird sort of way, the Fireflies, who claim to be fighting for freedom, are just as bad as the supposed fascist Fedra, maybe even more so. Would you really accept the word of a doctor who makes a bold claim about something he didn't even begin to study, simply because he's a medical scientist? Actually, no, don't answer that. Either way, I can't imagine much argument against Joel blasting everyone away as it's presented in the show. I'm a little amazed he spared the nurses. Like, the random soldiers who were wounded certainly didn't have any role in the decision. They were just doing their job. But the nurses were going to actively take part in killing Ellie. Why leave them alive? Aren't they even more guilty? Whatever. I'm not as sure about Joel's lying to Ellie at the end. The biggest problem by saying what he does is he is closing the door on a cure ever being found. Does he really believe the only hope for a cure is for her to die? Apparently so, which is the only way this makes sense. He's protecting her. I tend to think the truth here would have been the better option. It lets her make the decision. I guess the big question is, what would Ellie think? He doesn't know. No one does, as she's never even had the chance to consider it. Maybe we'll find out in season 2. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video. There's a lot more great analysis coming. Have a great day. I'll see you at the next watch party.